You won't believe what happened when HOA Karen set her sights on my property. She marched into my life demanding I leave, claiming my land belonged to her HOA, except it didn't. I stayed calm while she fumed, her face turning bright red, veins popping, hands trembling. She screamed about rules and fines like she owned the world. When I politely told her she had no authority over my land, she lost it completely, shouting, throwing papers and calling the cops. But here's the twist. The police quickly realized she was wrong, and the tables turned faster than I ever imagined. It started on a quiet Saturday morning. I had just finished mowing the lawn, the scent of fresh-cut grass heavy in the air, when I saw her walking up the driveway. Karen, HOA Karen, as I now call her, was decked out in her signature. I mean business outfit. Crisp white blouse, stiff khaki pants, sunglasses perched on her nose like a judge ready to pass sentence. She waved a thick stack of papers in my direction as she stomped across my yard. You need to vacate immediately. This property is under HOA jurisdiction. You're trespassing! Her voice was sharp, almost hysterical, as though the threat of fines alone could scare me off. I raised an eyebrow, setting down the hose. Ma'am, this is my land. Your HOA has no authority here. I kept my tone calm, measured, because I knew if I lost my cool, she'd think she had won. She paused for a split second, her mouth opening and closing like a goldfish, then shouted louder. I don't care! I've seen maps. I've talked to the board. You're breaking the rules! Her hands trembled as she jiggled the papers, the veins in her temples popping. I noticed her knuckles were white from gripping them so tightly. The neighbors had started to peek from behind their curtains. Some were shaking their heads. Others were smirking. Karen didn't notice. They were irrelevant in her world. I stepped closer, hands open in a gesture of peace. Let's settle this logically. Can you show me any legal document proving this land is under your HOA? Her face contorted in fury. I don't need documents. I know what I saw. She pointed dramatically, nearly losing her balance on the uneven lawn. Her voice rose to a shrill pitch. I'm calling the cops if you don't leave. That's when the inciting incident hit. She reached for her phone, jabbed at the screen, and started pacing back and forth, shrieking into the line. I could hear her yelling, demanding law enforcement enforce her imagined rules. My stomach tightened, not with fear, but with anticipation. I knew the next few minutes would determine whether I could stand my ground or get bullied off my own property. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and whispered under my breath, let's see how this plays out. Her meltdown had just begun, but I was ready. I immediately pulled up my property deed on my phone. The interface glowed in the morning sun, crisp lines and coordinates proving ownership. I called the HOA office, keeping the call brief but firm. The representative confirmed what I already knew. My land had never been part of the HOA. Karen's shouting escalated as I waved my phone in her direction. See this? Official records. I own this property. You have no authority here. She froze for a moment, as if processing the undeniable truth, but then erupted. Fake! That's fake! You're lying! Her voice cracked, high-pitched and desperate. She slammed the papers to the ground, sending a few sheets fluttering like frightened birds. I stayed calm, letting her rage feed itself. I had anticipated every possible argument. When she charged toward me, arms flailing, I stepped back, sidestepping her in perfect balance. Her momentum carried her a few steps past my front porch, tripping over a small decorative stone I had placed. She stumbled, shrieked, and barely caught herself on the mailbox. That was the perfect opening. I gently said, Ma'am, I think it's time to wait for the authorities. Her glare could have cut steel, but the tension was finally turning. She dialed 911 again, fumbling with her phone like a nervous teenager. By the time the cops arrived, she was pacing like a tiger in a cage, muttering threats about fines and eviction notices. I met the officers at the gate, holding my deed. She claims this is under her HOA, I explained calmly. As you can see, it's mine. Here are the records. They glanced at the papers, eyebrows raising, then back at Karen, who was now flailing and gesturing wildly. Their expressions were a mix of disbelief and amusement. I could feel the weight of vindication settling in my chest. The officers gently guided Karen to the curb to explain the situation. I watched, arms crossed as she sputtered, pointing at my yard and shouting, You can't do this! I have power here. I shook my head, trying not to grin. The showdown had turned in my favor. My calm, methodical response had neutralized her rage without escalating the situation. But this wasn't over yet. The fallout was about to unfold. Karen's meltdown made its rounds in the neighborhood. Word spread that she had called the cops to evict someone from land that wasn't even part of her HOA. Some neighbors came over, peeking over the fence, whispering about her obsession with rules she didn't enforce and lands she didn't own. The officers were patient but firm. They explained that she could not trespass on private property, and that her threats could be considered harassment if repeated. Karen's face was beet red now, jaw tight, fists trembling. She kept mumbling something about rights and authority, but it sounded hollow even to her. Social media didn't stay quiet either. A neighbor had recorded part of her meltdown and posted it online. Within hours, it spread through local HOA forums and neighborhood groups. Comments ranged from classic HOA Karen to she has completely lost it. Humiliation was real and Karen knew it. She tried one last card, claiming there was some hidden clause in the HOA bylaws, but the HOA office itself stepped in, confirming publicly that she had no legal standing. The officers left her with a warning. Any further attempts to interfere with my property could lead to fines or even criminal charges. Meanwhile, I received supportive messages from neighbors I barely knew. Some offered to help with security cameras. Others simply stopped by to check if I was okay. I realized that the social pressure Karen had tried to leverage against me had backfired completely. She had isolated herself through her arrogance and ignorance. By the evening, Karen had retreated, muttering about consulting a lawyer. I could see her parked across the street, slouched in her car, scrolling through her phone like a woman defeated. The contrast between her frantic rage that morning and her sullen posture now was almost cinematic. I leaned on my porch railing, watching quietly. Justice hadn't required force, just patience and clarity. In the days that followed, life returned to normal, but with a new sense of satisfaction. I installed a small security camera on the corner of my property, not because I feared Karen, but because I now understood how quickly misunderstandings and overreach could escalate. She tried a few passive-aggressive attempts to remind me she was watching, leaving HOA letters in my mailbox and pacing her property line while glaring, but I ignored her. Each time I felt a quiet vindication. The law and truth were on my side. My neighbors, once distant and indifferent, now greeted me warmly. "We saw what happened," they said. "You handled it perfectly." The support was refreshing, a reminder that calm, logical action often carries more weight than shouting or intimidation. I reflected on the incident while sitting on my porch one evening, coffee in hand, the sunset painting the yard gold. Karen's obsession with control had only revealed her insecurities. My reaction had been simple: stay calm, know my rights, and let facts speak louder than rage. A week later, the HOA emailed me an apology for the confusion and a reminder that no member had any authority over my property. Karen never approached me again. Her influence completely nullified. I realized something important. Standing firm and relying on truth and patience is more powerful than confrontation born of anger. As I looked around at the quiet, secure yard, I smiled, shaking my head at how one woman's meltdown had inadvertently unified a neighborhood and reaffirmed my sense of justice. Some battles aren't won by shouting. They're won by clarity, patience, and unshakable confidence. And in this case, Karen's fury had been her own undoing. I leaned back, took a deep breath, and whispered to myself, own your land, own your life, and never let anyone bully you into giving up either. If you felt the tension in this story, hit like, because supporting ordinary people fighting back matters. Subscribe to Vibe TV so you never miss real justice in action. And tell me below, how would you handle a Karen trying to overstep her bounds?